Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Visibility Factor podcast. This is Sue Barber, your host. I'm thrilled today to bring you my guest, Karen Williams, who calls herself a book mentor and has a ton of knowledge around personal brand, visibility, and helping people get their books out into the world. And you know that is no joke. I am in the midst of my own launch right now, and I know she can relate to that. So welcome to the show, Karen. I'm so thrilled to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me, Sue. I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to be talking about visibility. It's a core part of what I do as well. Yeah, I'm really excited to be talking to you.
Okay, so let's have you do more of a proper introduction of yourself and share with the audience a little bit about what you do, how you got into this work.
Well, I've been in business now since 2006, but I've started writing my first book in 2009, and I learned the hard way how to write a book. And actually, the way I got into the whole coaching side of things, which is how I started, I'm sure we'll touch on later as well. But I wrote my first book in 2009. I learned the hard way, had to work out how to write the book, how to get it published, how to get out of my own way when that got in the way. I'm an introvert by nature. And I said never again after that first book, even though it really transformed my business. And I'm on book number 11 right now. So I know what it's like to go through the launch myself. And for the last 11 or 12 years, I've been supporting business owners with their book. And ironically, it's to help them to become more visible, to help them to stand out, to be credible, to be the experts that they know they already are, but to really help to build that level of expertise outside of maybe their normal sphere of influence. So that's really what I do on a day-to-day basis. So I love writing, I love connecting, and I love doing podcasts, which is a good thing, isn't it?
It is, and I'm excited to be on your podcast soon. I was looking through all of the episodes that you have. It's called Business Bites. Is that?
Business Book Bites.
Right. And I thought it was really, there's some great topics you have in there for authors. So anyone who hasn't heard her podcast, I'll make sure it's in the notes. But there's some great topics around AI and a bunch of other things that you talk about. So I'm excited to binge listen to that really soon. So let's start off with, I'm a new author. I'm coming to you. I want to write this book. I don't really know how to write a book. I don't really know what to do. What is your first bit of advice? Like, what helps people really get comfortable with the idea that they can actually write a book?
Gosh, that's a big question. I think partly many of my authors, they're writing a book to build their credibility. So they're not writing about a subject they don't know about. So the first off is deciding, what are you writing? And also, why are you writing it? Because when the going gets tough, or you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning thinking, I really want to write, it's the knowing your why, knowing why you're doing it and the purpose behind it will keep you going. But you do need to know what you're writing about, who you're writing it for. And ultimately, it's creating that really strong, compelling idea that will get you started. But we also know that the inner critic can get in the way for more often than we care to admit, as it did with me for the first book. And I would love to say it never happened for any of the others. And if I said that, I would be lying. But I think there's so many things can get in our way. For many, it's like, I don't know how to get started. I don't know how I'm going to find the time. But it is really about finding that first perfect idea that's going to keep you excited and it's going to keep you motivated. And of course, having someone to support you on the journey will help to raise that as you go through the process.
And I think it's such a black box, when you're not familiar with the publishing industry or have never written anything other than maybe something on LinkedIn like I had, it feels very daunting and overwhelming for sure. So how do you keep people from quitting?
I think it really depends, but I think at the core, I have a process that I take all of my clients through, even though they might not realize. So, there's a process that helps them to stop feeling so overwhelmed. So ultimately, if someone's working with me, they only need to know the next step. They don't need to know the next 20 steps. So my job is to guide them through things step by step so they actually feel like they're in control of what they're doing. In terms of a book, if you're looking to write something that's normally around 50,000 words, that can feel daunting. So what I tend to do with my clients is I break it into bite-sized chunks. So if I'm working with a new client, getting really clear on the message and the idea behind the book, we get clear on the structure of the book. So ultimately, when they turn up for a writing session, A, they know what they're writing, and B, they don't sit there for an hour going, I don't know what I'm doing today. I know this will be kind of passé by the time this episode goes out, but I'm starting to run a writing sprint next week. And one of the things we do with that is we do bite-sized chunks. It's an hour writing. That's all it is. So actually, when people say they haven't got the time, it's about looking at making the most of the time you do have available. Because most people can find an hour here, an hour there. When you know what you're doing one step at a time. It makes it easier than trying to do a whole book that feels overwhelming and daunting and scary.
Yeah. I remember when I was, heading down my path early on and I really didn't understand everything yet. And I remember thinking, I need to go hide away in a cabin in the woods somewhere for 3 weeks and just write because it felt like I couldn't find the time. And so we also used the sprint concept and that changed my life. When I realized that I could just get together with people, it's like a co-working session. For
Mm.
those of you who aren't familiar with the sprint terminology, it's where you get together and you basically write and you can break it in half or you can do it for the whole time. But it's just the community coming together and everybody focused on their own stuff. But it's easier to do when you know other people are going to be there supporting you too.
Yeah, so I ran the sprint for the first time in the summer, and it got to around about week 3 when people were saying to me, "When are you doing it again?" And I was doing it next summer. And they said, "No, we want one before that." And everybody signed up again for the autumn sprint and more, which is amazing. So I'm really looking forward to doing it. But it's also prompted me to start my writing. I said right at the very beginning, Sue, that I'm writing my 11th book. I am very, very early days. I used the summertime to get really clear on my proposal, my
Mm,
synopsis. I was away for a couple of weeks where I spent probably about half an hour a day really getting clear on the structure. And that will make it so much easier to start writing next week because I'm doing it alongside my clients, which is, I can't think of a better place to do it alongside that community, that support. Of course, my job is to support them, but I also have, 45 minutes of time where I can focus on my own writing, which is lovely.
yeah.
And for those people who do like to go away, and I am one of them, I do run a writing retreat in Spain as well. What's not to love about that?
Lovely.
There is something about that immersion, though, that is quite powerful because I do like to, I'm writing a book now. I would like to go away and do some writing, but I also know that I have quite a good plan now. So I should be able to write it,
Yeah.
with that consistency. But it is about that consistent action. You can't just put it away for a few weeks and think you're going to pick it up again because those few weeks will turn into another few weeks to another few weeks. It is about that consistency. And if life does get in the way, it's about getting back on the horse and getting back to it.
Yeah. So I know this is true for you because you've now, at your 11th book, but do you find a lot of authors find that they really love the process of putting a book out and then write more, or do you find it's kind of 50-50?
It's probably 50-50. I've got a couple of books that I'm reviewing. I'm doing some developmental editing on for clients at the moment. And they're both second books because they've worked with me for the first. And then, I'm picking up the second as they approach the end because they know the process. And it's a joy to actually see them following the process and actually following the structures I put in place for book number 2, even though I've sort of been involved, but not been so heavily involved in the second one. One of my clients is writing her third at the moment. I've got another client writing her second. But some people don't do it, or they put a pause on after the first one because they
Hmm.
know that they also need to make the most of that book as well. There is a tendency, and I'm a little bit like this. I will get a book out there and I go, what's next? And actually, you also need to make sure you consolidate what you've got with the first book and
Hmm.
promote it and do podcasts and talk about it and share reviews and actually keep that momentum going as well as thinking about what's next. So it's all
Yeah.
part of the bigger plan at the end of the day. It's making sure that we know that we're writing a book, but where does it fit into our ecosystem, our structure, and what we want to do more of in our businesses or our lives?
Yeah. We kind of talk about it as the launch is just the starting point to a much longer marathon.
I think the launch is like, the thing.
Well, it depends, right? What do you want to do with your book? If you just want to put it out there, great, you've done it.
Yeah.
For me, it was a big shift in mindset too about process. I think it felt overwhelming at first, only because I'd never been through it. And so it took me longer on the first book, this workbook that I put out much faster. So I think once you know the process, it does feel a bit easier. Plus, I'd let go of all that corporate armor I'd been holding on to for a long time in the first book. And so now I don't have to worry about that anymore on this one. So it's a little bit easier.
I think it does
Oh,
become easier. I think, my first book took 18 months. My second one took about 6 months. My third took around about the same. I did have one book that lasted 3 years, but I did write another one in the midst of that.
uh,
So I think it does become easier. And the one I'm working on now, I've been thinking about it for 5 years. And then suddenly I think with working with my clients this year, it's like, I'm ready to do it now. I needed to be at the stage where it felt authentic and the right time for me to actually get it out there.
I love that though, because I feel like I have a ton of ideas for books too that I have on a list. And I don't know, I think I know which one is gonna be next, but I'm gonna save that for once this workbook comes out
Yeah.
and give myself some space to think about it. Let's talk for just a minute around burning out because a lot of people can burn themselves out. Just the writing journey can be challenging, but then also knowing that there is marketing and all of the things you just talked about. How do you help people not burn out or at least prepare for what's coming?
I think with my clients, I try and be there every step of the way. So they know that they're a WhatsApp or a phone call away if they're struggling with something. Um, you know, being somebody who has burnt out, not massively, but I have gone through that moment of kind of almost burning out. And I also know when I run on empty, I've just been on holiday and I could recognize a few weeks before I went on holiday that, I didn't have a lot left in the tank, but recognizing and knowing that is so important. So I do keep an eye out with my clients, but it's just about being realistic with time. So I've got a client who's launched his book today and it could have easily have launched a month ago. We were pretty much ready, but I didn't want to put him under pressure for it. And sometimes you have to look at the bigger picture going, actually, we could rush this. And actually, do we need to rush it? So that's the important thing is that, yes, you want to publish a book yesterday, don't you, really? You don't want to publish it in a few months' time, but just be realistic over timeframes and when it really needs to be out there. I have seen a lot of people push themselves way too much. And so it is about just recognizing when you are getting to that stage of, you know what, I need to pull back. And, what happens if a book is, a few months later than planned? The world's not going to end at the end of the day. Not for
Yeah.
most people, anyway.
Yeah, I actually pushed mine back into October because it was originally gonna be September, and, I just gave myself some grace. Some things happened that were unexpected, and I just rolled with it this time. I didn't stress out about it, and I actually delayed the first book too, if I'm honest. I had some dates planned, and those didn't end up happening, but, I feel like it comes out when it's supposed to come out.
Yeah.
And so, once you make some peace with that and don't put pressure on yourself, of course, if you're going through a publisher, that might be a different story, but self publishing
Mm.
allows you to make your own decisions about what you want to do.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, so let's transition into my favorite topic, which is visibility. And I'd love to hear from you. What are some things that you talk about with your authors around getting visibility? Because I think for some people, it may come natural. And
Mm.
definitely for me, it did not. So I'm just curious how you help people through that because it is important.
Absolutely, it's important. I think, a lot of people who write books are introverts. Not everybody, but a lot are introverts. And one of the reasons why we write our books is to express ourselves through writing. But we also do need to get the books out there. If you think about when you publish a book, there will be people, if you've done it right, within your community who are interested in buying the book, interested in working with you. But actually, you do need to reach people who don't know about you yet. You can't put your book on Amazon or any of the other platforms and hope people are going to find it. Of course, you can, put the right keywords in, but actually, you have to speak to more people. You have to get yourself out there on speaking engagements, book tours, podcasts, social media. And it's one of the things I encourage all my clients to do right from the very beginning. So I made an announcement earlier this week with my email list that I'm writing this book. And I've written two very draft chapters and a few paragraphs. So I'm putting it out there already, and I will take people on the journey with me because that's what I would encourage my clients to do. Now, not everybody does it, and some people feel a bit scared by it because you're talking about something that hasn't existed yet. But
Mhm.
actually, there is that motivation. I put a declaration out early this week to say I will have the first part drafted by around about the 5th of December, very latest Christmas. And that's quite scary as well because I now have to deliver on that. And it may be that the only person who remembers that is me, but I feel that I have an obligation to do it. And actually, I want to do it, to be fair. So, being visible is one of the things, if you're writing a book, be visible right from the very start. Visibility didn't come naturally to me. I know we've got a similar story in terms of work related story. So, the reason I became a coach back in 2006 is because my boss said to me one day, I wish you'd stand out more. Where I was in a meeting and I'm a reflector. I didn't say too much. I was quite quiet. And it was one of the things that prompted me to almost say, I'll show you. And I think that's been part of my life ever since. So I do push myself. I do go outside of my comfort zone quite a lot. But I think the more you push yourself outside your comfort zone, the more it grows as well. So I love
Mhm.
doing podcasts. Like, as you said, I've got my own podcast now as well. Had that for a couple of years. So it is really about taking those baby steps. And I think in terms of visibility, we don't have to do everything. You don't have to be on every single platform. You don't have to be standing in front of groups of 1,000 people. It's choosing the things where your ideal readers, ideal clients, ideal people hang out and doing a few things well rather than trying to do a lot of things badly.
If you look at, LinkedIn, for example, right now, there's so much. It can
Mm.
be overwhelming and feel like there's a lot of noise. And how do you break through that? What are some of the top tips that you give to people that has worked for them?
Storytelling, authenticity, being real. I think that's the main thing when it comes to LinkedIn. I always find that my most successful LinkedIn posts are those that I've done off the cuff without really thinking, normally the personal stories,
Yeah.
whereas the ones I carefully craft to make look lovely, and I might use Canva and create a carousel or something, they're the ones that don't really do so well. But the
Same.
conversations, it's the memories, it's I did quite a few things in 2012 that really pushed my comfort zone. If I share like memories of, I did the Inca Trail and I did a parachute jump and things like that, that's the sort of thing is more likely to get traction. My husband and I just had our anniversary. That's got quite a lot of traction as well. So it tends to be those personal stories that tend to engage people so much more than, hey, this is what you do and how you do it. But I think there is a time and a space for both because people want to
Uh-huh.
know, they want pieces of advice, they want to know how to do things. But also, I think having that personality and being willing to be vulnerable is going to make a difference.
Yeah. And I think part of it is like building know, like, and trust with people that you don't know.
Absolutely.
And I feel like for me, I leverage a lot of vulnerability, which was
Mm,
scary at first, for sure.
of course.
And it was easier to do when it was just my blog, right? But then once I attached it to the book and all the stories in the book, and a lot of that I hadn't shared with anyone really before the book came out. It it helped me, I think, find my voice, and it helped me relate to what was happening with other people, and then they could in turn relate to my stories and my experiences that they were going through. I also find when I just post something like AJ's editing retreat, and I posted a beautiful picture of Lake Superior, which is gorgeous, right? And so I just talked about that experience and being there. And I am a true believer too that if you can give a peek under the tent about
Mm,
this process of writing and even the marketing side, any piece of it, it's an unknown to many people. Not everybody writes a book, and not everybody has the patience to do it. And so I think they're just in awe a little bit or admire you for doing it. And to me, it's just about doing the work. So it all comes together the way it's supposed to at the end of the day. And in whatever you post, I think as long as you're authentic. I love that you said that. What is the biggest challenge with people putting more of themselves out there from their personal perspective?
I wrote my own story back in 2015, 2016 called The Mouse That Roars, which is my personal story. And when I wrote that book, the biggest challenge I had is that it was about me and it wasn't about other people. So, how much of other people do you put in the book without upsetting people? And I find
Mhm.
that, most of my clients are writing nonfiction self help books, but I do work with a fair number of clients who are writing memoirs, autobiographies. And then you've got that added nuance, I guess, of having other people. So I remember working with a client many years ago who he had signed a compromise agreement with work, which means that he wasn't able to talk about the way in which he parted that organization. So we had to get legal advice. His ex-wife, who was his wife in part of the book, we had to be careful and tread carefully around there. So I think that, there are difficulties there. The other thing is if you haven't healed from a situation, I didn't come up with this, but I tend to use it a lot, is talking from a healed scar, not an open wound. Because if you haven't healed from something, if you're still struggling with something and you haven't had the therapy or the support to get through it, it can feel a little bit like, well, it may not come across as good as it could do. So I think
Mhm.
there are things like that that are challenging when you're sharing your story. I also think in a self-help book, it's like how much of your story, how much of you do you share? Because ultimately the book is for your readers. Now, they don't want to know too much about you, but you need enough for them to know that you know what it's like to be like them, whether it's through your story or client stories or both. So I think it's just that balance can be quite hard. I'm just about to start working with a new client, and I know it's one of the things that this client is going through as well is where do you stop with sharing your story and make it about the reader? So there is that fine line and that balance when you're writing a book in that way.
So I don't know if I told you this, but when I wrote my original manuscript for the Visibility Factor, I was sharing it with AJ, and I went to her editing retreat, and everyone was reading their first chapters. And it was lovely. And there were tears, like there was very emotional moments. And I thought, I don't have any of that in my first chapter at all. And when I talked to her that day, she's like, Sue, you're the most invisible person in your book about visibility. And she said, you didn't talk about your work. You didn't talk about why you're writing the book. You didn't talk about all of the things that I know would help them. And so, again, that was part of my journey to get comfortable with that. When you go into something
Mm.
new, there are doubts. You might have some imposter syndrome. Who am I to say I can be an author? Accept the fact that you are doing this. You deserve to do this. The reader deserves to read it. And it gets to this place where it just gets more comfortable.
One of my clients recently said to me, she launched her book about a month ago, and she said it was like therapy,
Oh,
working with me and actually writing the book. And it was a memoir style book based on her story. So she said it was like therapy. And I think when you do write a book about your personal journey, the highs, the bad, the ugly, you do go on that journey. You have to take yourself back to times where maybe you didn't feel comfortable, and you have to show up, and you have to be pretty much warts and all in terms of what you say. If you have to go backwards into a time that you didn't find very helpful, it's always about anchoring yourself back to the present. You're not the person you used to be. And I think
mhm.
it's that memory, is that kind of shift, that change of state, I'm using NLP terms, is something that's important, is just making sure we ground ourselves back into the present if we're writing about something that's painful as well. So just another tip for authors or people thinking about writing a book, or even people that have gone through something difficult that they're trying to get through now, is that, we grow, we progress, we move on. I was that mouse. I still am that mouse sometimes if I allow her to come into my life. I'm also the raw that is showing up and actually hopefully making a bigger difference in people's lives.
I definitely felt all of those things that you just talked about for sure. But I did feel like there was some cathartic moments, I'll say,
Yeah.
to put myself back into that moment of when I got the feedback to talk about all of the experiences I had was definitely a challenge. And in the new workbook, I did the same thing with first job. And so I went back in time to first job and had another aha moment. So I really believe that reflection helps us to grow and to recognize that now that that's in the past, we can look at it with different, wisdom, a different set of experiences under our belt, a lot more confidence probably, and start to see that it doesn't define us. It isn't the one thing that we need to hold on to forever. Now we have grown and we can let that go and move forward into something else.
Yeah, and I think the great thing about a book as well, Sue, is the fact that we validate our experience as well, don't we? One of the things I find myself and also with my clients is that to write a book, we recognize what we already know, we recognize the gaps in our knowledge, and we will seek to fill those gaps by research and by interviews, surveys, or some sort of secondary research. So actually, you become more knowledgeable, more experienced, more visible, I guess, because we are engaging with the topic around our book and we're putting ourselves forward with that. So I think that's another unexpected benefit of writing a book, is that
Mhm.
everything enriches and gets bigger and more exciting as well.
Yeah, I think I felt the same. I don't know if you did. When you became a coach, I think there's a lot of self reflection you have to do and all of that. I learned a lot about myself going through becoming a
Yeah.
coach and now having done it for a number of years. I think it's always a growing and learning process for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So I became a coach in 2006, and then I went on to do 3 years of NLP training as well.
Mhm.
So again, I found that every time I did that, there was an extra layer. It was almost like an extra layer being peeled away, I guess, in terms
Mhm.
of I went, oh, okay, I know that about myself, because you land up working on yourself as part of the process. So for me, I think, I got into coaching because I had coaching, which I know happens for many people as well. I had
Yes.
coaching to help me. And then I went, oh, I'd quite like this. I'd quite like to work for myself, not realizing everything that I'd have to do to create a business. That's a different
Mhm.
story. But
Yeah.
actually, I found something and I thought, well, if I've changed, I want to help other people change as well. So,
Yeah.
I know that I'm not unusual in terms of that approach.
Yeah. I was so excited when I met with, she was my first, I'll say, real coach. And I thought, this is a job? Like, you can do this?
Yeah.
It's like, wow, I had no idea. I just want to step back for 1 second. For those who don't know what NLP is, I do, but I would love for you to share a little bit about that and your experience with it because I know how powerful that is.
Gosh, it's quite a long time ago now. It stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. It was originally introduced by Richard Bandler and the other guy whose name has totally gone out of my head now. I think it was 50 years ago. I think their 50th anniversary came up recently. And it is about really reprogramming our, the things in our head, basically. To be fair, I don't tend to use it that much anymore, but it's one of the tools in my toolkit, because it can apply to things in the workplace around rapport, relationships, definitely communication. So if you haven't come across it before, look it up and have
Yeah.
a little looky at it. I did my
Yes.
diploma practitioner, master practitioner, but that was a long time ago now.
Yeah, but it's all inside of you still. You can use
Oh,
it all for
absolutely,
whatever.
absolutely. It still comes up. I still talk about it. I just talk about it in different ways, I guess, now.
Of course. Yeah, yeah. So let's just talk about your own journey of being a coach and having your own business. How has that journey been for you? What have you learned along the way?
That's a big question. What I've learned, well, I never started out as a book mentor, obviously. Back in 2006, I started out as a career coach because my background was HR and training. So,
Mm.
I did a lot of training alongside the coaching. I went into corporates, did some training, but I found that I really enjoyed the one-to-one coaching because I realized the difference I could make on a one-to-one basis. But the problem is when you're delivering one-to-one change, you're not making that bigger difference. So I wanted to create bigger ripples, I guess, in the pond, in the river, and in the sea. So I suppose that led to me with the writing the books, just to make a bigger difference. It was only 2013, 14 when I actually moved into the book space. And that's because a lot of my clients who were kind of made a transition into the business side of things after book number one. And many of my clients were saying, Karen, you've written a couple of books. How did you do it? And I went, well, it's easy, forgetting everything I'd gone through. And I also realized I had a process. So I started in 2014 to refine my process, wrote another book about it. And that's really where I came into the book side of things because I've done it so many times myself and worked with clients doing different projects, different things, that I'm always learning. I'm always finding something new. So I didn't come from a publishing background. My expertise is helping people to really get clear on what they're good at and not just writing the book, but making sure that there's an ecosystem around the book. So the book is kind of the nub of what they do, but they actually use it as a visibility tool, as a strategic business tool, and they use it to create, programs, products, services that help them to become a successful business or to increase the success of their business.
It's kind of like the foundation that you can build a lot of other things off of.
Yeah.
How was the experience of leaving corporate for you and moving into this world? Because I know that's a transition as well.
I held on to corporate for quite some time, actually. I became a coach in 2006. November 2006, I went, hey, I'm a coach. And then I had to kind of work out how to build a business off the back of it. And so I worked for the first 3 years. I had a brilliant boss who was a lovely lady and she supported me every step of the way. So I dropped a day, I dropped another day. Eventually I was working half a blooming day a week. It's just like, why am I doing this? And then my husband and I got a chance to go to Australia for 5 weeks and they wouldn't let me have the time off. So I
Mm.
said, right, I quit. So I went to Australia, came back and went, what do I do now? Especially after 5 weeks off traveling around Australia. And then I had to really just, buckle down and get on with it, really.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a lovely transition time right there, just going to Australia and getting away. I think that's always a good thing. For me, I think it felt like I was still in that world and had to show up in a certain way in this world as well. And I think
Mm,
there's an opportunity, an identity shift that I
yes.
definitely had to make and let go of that and move into this
Mm.
world. And I think that's true whenever you're doing something like that. Any advice that you would give to someone who is thinking about leaving corporate and doing something like being a coach or having their own business? Any advice you would give them?
Well, in 2012, I read a book called A Year to Live by, he's now passed, a guy called Stephen Levine. And it was all he and his wife worked with terminally ill cancer patients who didn't have much more time on the planet. And the whole premise behind the book, or what I took from the book anyway, and I know everyone takes something different, was the fact that we never know when our time's up. And actually, the year after that, my dad passed away. So none of us know how long we've got left on the planet. So it makes sense to me to do what you really want to do every day. So
Mhm.
if you're not happy doing something, do something different.
Yeah.
If you really want to do something new, why not go for it? If you really want to write a book or stand on stage or do a TEDx, whatever it is, what's the worst that can happen and what's the best that can happen? So
Yeah.
I think that is a philosophy, during that year of 2012, I said yes to pretty much everything, because none of us know what time we've got left. So for me, it's about just taking a step forward, even if it's a toe in the water. It doesn't have to be a full leap. But for me, that's really important, that there's too many people out there who do what they hate every day. And I want more people to do what they enjoy doing. And that's why I mentor business owners writing books now, because together we are making big shifts in the world. We're saying,
Hmm.
hey, life doesn't have to be like this. You could do this instead. Or they're saying, I went through this pain and problem. I went through the other side. Why don't you do that? So we're about inspiring, we're about motivating, and we're about making that bigger difference in the world and changing things.
Yeah. So many people unhappy for sure.
Yeah,
And
I
I
know.
love I love that. I haven't heard of that book, but I'm definitely going to add it to my list and I'll add it to the show notes for everyone. I think it is an important thing because when I left in August of 2015, not knowing that my dad was really sick. And
Mm,
I don't think he realized how sick he was. And he passed in September. So I'm so grateful that I left when I did and chose to leave because I got that time with him that I wouldn't
yeah,
have gotten. And I also
really.
think about the things that you and I have done since we left that would not have existed in the world. I mean,
No,
just if you, I think about that a lot sometimes when someone will ask me about coming into this world, and I think I wouldn't have written 2 books. I wouldn't have had the podcast. I wouldn't have met all these amazing people that I've met.
no.
And it's really kind of a perspective shift sometimes for me to look back, see where I came from and where I am now. I feel like a totally different person in so many ways just from what I've learned about myself.
Yeah, I would totally agree with you. So, I've had opportunities to go to a retreat in the US, in California. When I was in Portugal recently on holiday, I had a chance to meet up with a former client of mine and experience her retreat there and just see what it's like, with the view to who knows where that might go. Portugal retreat, anyone?
Yeah.
And the chances I get and the opportunities I get to speak to amazing people throughout the world as well, whether it's through podcasts, whether it's authors who are working with me. I mentioned 2012, I jumped out of an aeroplane and things like that. I never would have done it if I was stuck in that corporate job
Mhm.
going through the day to day. My life would have been so different. I'm lucky I've got an amazing husband who supports me every step of the way, and we're there for each other. Sometimes I have the highs, he has the lows, and vice versa. But I think that's really important to have that stability and know that what opportunities can you create.
Yeah, it's amazing. You can do a lot more than you realize. And I never thought I
Yeah.
was creative. And I feel like I'm much more creative now because I just kind of stopped holding on to that limiting belief that I'd held on to for a really long time. Oh my gosh, we went to a lot of places here, but is there anything else you want to share that I didn't ask you about that you'd love for the audience to hear?
I don't think so. If anyone is looking to build their visibility with a book, check out my website. I know you'll include it in the show
Yes.
notes anyway. So,
Yeah.
and anything I can do to support people, I think, yeah, I'm just going to reiterate the fact that if you really want to do something like write a book, it's not outside of your capability. I think we can all do it. Um, it's easier when you get support, but I think anyone can do it at the end of the day,
Yeah.
whether it's fiction, non-fiction. Obviously, my expertise is working with non-fiction business authors, but I think it's just about doing what you really want to do. Do what you love every day. That's important in my book anyway. And also know that it's hard work. I do work long hours in my business, but I also had a lovely walk this afternoon in the sunshine. Working for yourself just gives you that flexibility as well, as you probably find, so that it's not a
Hmm.
9 to 5. I was working till about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock last night, and that's not unusual. But equally, I get to enjoy myself every day and do things like this.
Yes. And I find it doesn't feel like work a lot. I mean, I know there's
No,
things to do, but I find like just seeing what I can come up with. And for me, now the morning is my more creative time. So I try to hold time in the morning to write and do the things that I want to do and, schedule my, life accordingly after that. So that has been a real joy to be able to do that for myself, where I used to just try to fit it all in between other things that just didn't work. So I thought, you know what? You're a good boss. You get to decide what you want to do. Okay. Well, I will put all the information in for your website and anywhere else you'd like people to connect with you. But we're going to go into what I call the Rise Up and Be Visible quick tips. These are 4 questions that I ask every guest. So the first one, we've talked a little bit about it, but let's hear your definition of what you think visibility is and why you feel like that's true.
I remember seeing Tony Robbins once. I did his 4-day Unleash the Power Within about 12 years ago, I think it was now. And he says, fear is excitement without the breath. So when we feel fear, when we feel scared about doing something, just breathe. Breathe your way through it. So, I think when we do feel scared about something, our breathing can get quite shallow. And that's something, many things stayed with me after that weekend. But that's the thing that probably I think of more than anything. If I'm scared about doing something, I just breathe.
Hmm.
So that's my advice there.
Yeah. And what are you doing to be visible?
For me personally, I'm doing things like podcasts. I do go out there and talk quite a lot. I do video. I hate doing video. I still do video. I did a video yesterday. But I think it's also pushing your comfort zone in terms of everything that you do. I'm work in progress, to be honest, Sue.
Uh,
I am much more comfortable sitting down, writing a chapter, but I will put myself out there and go and do speaking gigs and things like that.
Yeah, my evolution of doing video took some time too. So
Yeah.
completely, you and I are the same in terms of like introvert for sure.
Yeah.
What is the best leadership or career advice you've ever received?
I think, I'm going to bring it back to the year to live. And it's not really career or leadership advice, but, it is about just do what you love every day. Um, so, when I did the career coaching, again, a similar message is that if you're not happy somewhere, do something else. Do what you enjoy, find what you enjoy. We did a lot of work taking me back now around strengths and things like that. So it's being really clear on your skills, your strengths, what you're good at, what's transferable. So hopefully that'll help your listeners as well, is thinking about what you're good at and what do you want to do more of in your life.
And what is a book you would recommend?
So I was thinking about this yesterday when I was preparing because there's lots of books I could recommend. I know we connected through Deborah Nash, who's also written a
Yes,
brilliant book as well. But the one that came to my mind is The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. So he talks about the upper limit problem. I don't know if you've come across it, Sue.
I have.
Basically, is we achieve a certain amount of success and then we limit ourselves. We stop ourselves doing the next thing. I read that many years ago. It's not a recent book, but I think it's something that still sticks with me, that upper limit problem, that when I face my own upper limit problem as well, I'm not immune to it. But it is just about sort of, almost knocking on the ceiling and going, okay, so let's push it up a little bit further.
Like, that's a good visual, right? Like, if you could just adjust the ceiling height
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
keep doing that. Yeah, I definitely read that book. It was probably when I moved into this world of coaching, I was given that as a recommendation to read. And what a great book. I mean, it really does push you to think differently about what you might want to do and to realize that there's more possibilities than I think we tend to give ourselves.
Mm,
Just think about sometimes you only see what's in front of you. And when when you can start to look past that and say, wow, well, what if I could do that? What if I could make that happen? How amazing would that be? So, yes, I love that book. So, I will make sure that there is a link to that in the show notes for everyone. And I just want to thank you for coming on. I'm thrilled that Deborah connected us. I love her. I have her book right here. I love it so much. And I've been sharing it, sending it to clients because I just found it to be such a helpful book. So I know you had a large role in that as well. And I think it's just an amazing book. So happy for her success for sure.
thank
Lovely
you.
to have you here, have you share your perspective on everything visibility and writing a book and authorship. And I am just thrilled to know you. I think you are just a really authentic person and you share your gifts with the world. And we need more people like that. So thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining today on the Visibility Factor podcast. And we'll catch you on the next one.